Welcome to the Sellsword Sword News Show.
The best sword news show on the internet.
The only sword news show on the internet.
And we like those odds.
First up, we have pop culture sword news, starting with video games.
Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 just came out.
Clark is our researcher. He's been playing the game. Clark, what do you think?
It's got good swords, good armor, and good combat. It's a good game.
Well, you heard it here. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, objectively the best sword video game ever made. Moving on.
Next up, we have sword book news.
Weirdly, we have 3 stories this week on sword book news. The first is the Stormlight Archives released its 5th and final book. Clark is our researcher. He's been reading it. Clark, what do you think?
It's got cool magic swords. Magic swords are cool. It's a cool book.
Well, you heard it here. Stormlight Archives, Wind and Truth, objectively the best sword book ever made. Moving on.
Next up, Sword Jesus has written his sword Bible. Martin Fabian came out with Fechtbook Fabian.
Martin Fabian, a well-respected person in the hema community and former number 2 longsword fencer in the world, has released his own Fecht book, which is kind of a big deal because this hasn't happened in like 500 years.
It's been a long time.
But some people are mad about it.
Mad? What are they mad about?
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that he's not a 500-year-old dead fencing master.
Rookie move. That's gonna cost him. So, David, have you read the book?
No, I can't read. Moving on.
Next up, the Shilhao in detail has come out. 200 pages on just one technique, the Shilhao.
This is impressive because the Shilhao gets exactly 1 sentence in the original Zettel, so somebody making 200 pages out of it is quite remarkable.
That's dedication. He sure contemplated the Shilhao.
Clark, have you read the book?
No.
Can you read?
Yes.
Well, we can definitely say this is objectively the longest book about the Shilhao. Moving on.
Next up, we have Hema Drama.
The debate about whether or not to tip your swords has reared its ugly head once again, even though we thought we'd killed it once and for all.
The debate is, should you put a rubber tip on your spatulated or rolled tips?
Personally, I don't like the feel of a rubber on my sword. Clark, what about you?
I prefer it raw.
Well, there you have it. Raw dogging your opponent is objectively the best way to fence.
Way better fooling.
Moving on.
Next up, tournament news.
Bohema was an event that happened last year where there were quite a bit of injuries. This year, they decided to come back, double down, and they branded their tournament Bohema, the Afterblow.
Wild take.
Big cash prize for the winner, too. I'm sure no one's gonna get hurt this time.
But are they gonna tip their tips?
That's the real question. Safety first. Moving on.
Next up, we have Comment Combat.
This is where we look at your dumb comments and tell you that you're wrong.
Recently, our video about the hook sword whip's been going viral, and here are some comments.
Jimmy727 says, what if you miss?
Keep swinging.
Bobby420 says, wouldn't you disarm yourself?
Yes, but you have 2 swords, so no.
Big Tex 6969 says, what if you're fighting multiple opponents?
This is probably the best time to do that.
That's all for hook swords. Moving on to...
Can swords block electricity?
A lot of people were mad about our extremely scientific video that is objectively correct about whether or not you would be electrocuted through your sword by magical electricity powers.
But people may have pointed out in the comments that that's not how cattle prods work and that it was not scientific at all. And to this, we have to say,
shut up.
Moving on! Next up on Comment Combat, we have a video where we said that dueling sabers don't really bind that much.
Old grumpy French guy 42069 says that sabers do bind and that I don't know what I'm talking about. Now, Clark, you've been fencing saber for a while now. Have you ever gotten a bind with a saber?
No.
What happens when you try and bind somebody else with a saber?
They cut around and hit me in the head, or the arm, or the leg, or anywhere, really.
Well, I guess to respond to your comment, old grumpy French guy 42069, fight me. Moving on! Next, let's go to our correspondent on the streets for some breaking sword news.
It's so cold. Why am I out here? It's 2025. Nobody even uses swords. This show makes no sense. It's completely irrelevant.
Great insights as always, Fry.
Great reporting.
Moving on.
Next up we have Good Sword, Bad Sword.
Where we tell you if a sword is good
or if it's bad. First up, Sasuke's grass cutter from Naruto.
Good sword.
It's basically a straight katana with no crossguard.
This is a perfectly good sword. Sure, it doesn't have a lot of hand protection, but I mean, it's designed to be pretty compact and easy to carry around. It's a shorter length, which would come in handy for that specific purpose.
Single edge, straight.
Probably good at thrusting too.
Well, good at thrusting. A good sword.
Good sword.
Good sword.
Moving on.
Corvo's sword from Dishonored.
Bad sword.
Cool sword. We want it to be a good sword.
This is a hard one because Corvo is objectively cool and this sword is objectively cool, but if you actually had to use this sword, it would be a nightmare. Too many moving parts. It's definitely gonna break, especially with all the stuff he puts it through.
We want it to be a good sword, but it's just not. It's gonna fail. Too many moving parts. Too complicated.
Bad sword.
Bad sword. Next up, the Witcher's Silver Sword. Good sword.
This is basically just a long sword with a cooler looking crossguard.
And a cooler looking pommel.
Now, some people might think this sword is completely made out of silver, but that's not true. It's actually made out of a meteorite ore, which actually was a real thing. Historically, they did use meteorite ore to make swords, and it held up just fine.
That's true.
So it has that, and then it has a silver plating, or it has silver infused into it, which would make it just as durable durable as any steel sword, perhaps more durable.
But we're not men of science, so to test that, we're gonna go to a sword expert.
Hello, Hans van Wissenschaft here, the sword expert for Sellsword Sword News Show. And I am here to say that this is very good sword, scientifically very good. Back to you, David, who I am definitely not. I am not David, I am Hans van Wissenschaft. Expert observations as always, not David.
That was a very scientific hat.
Yes, moving on!
Next up, we have the Herrenmark sword from the live-action Wheel of Time.
Which is objectively a
bad sword.
Wait a minute, what?
It's a terrible sword.
It's just a katana.
Yeah, it's just a double-edged katana sword, but this is a bad Herrenmark sword, which
No.
is a terrible sword.
It doesn't matter. What are you talking? It's just a katana. Katanas are good. We know katanas are good.
Yeah, but Herrenmark swords are not katanas. They're more like Swiss sabers. Did they even read the books?
No, probably not, because they're not nerds.
Well,
That's a
I
perfectly
did
good
read
sword.
the books.
Listen, if you say this, Hey guys, we hope you liked this video. It was a fun, silly experiment we thought we'd try out. We had a lot of fun making it, so we hope you like it. Please let us know what you think of it in the comments section. If you like this video or any of our other videos, please consider supporting the channel for as low as $1 a month on Patreon. It's a huge help. Also, check out sellswordarts.com.